Good morning, and thank you for coming today. My name is Tracy Metal. I'm the current captain overseeing the investigative division.
And I'm Steve Wool. I'm a lieutenant, and I currently supervise the major crimes unit here in investigations.
So in our ongoing efforts to increase transparency, we are providing this session as an opportunity to release some body camera footage and some additional evidentiary footage and some redacted police reports for you today, and we are able to give you a little bit more detail based on the fact that we have the prosecutor's decision in this case. We will be giving you information today to provide some context as to what you will see, and showing a portion of video footage and offering an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. But at this time, I want to turn it over to Lieutenant Steve Wool to read a summary of the incident for you.
Okay, so I'll read this overall summary. It'll kind of build up the case on what occurred and where we're at today. So this was written by Detective Corey Turman, who was one of the leads in this investigation. He writes, on April 28th, 2016, at approximately 19:08 hours, Michael S. Kurtz called 911, stating that he wanted to die and was holding a knife to his chest. This call was dispatched as a suicide attempt. Officers Lynch, Atkins, and LaQuire of the Spokane Police Department were the initial responders. Dispatchers continued to gather information and broadcast it to other responding officers. Kurtz provided his location, his name, and claimed that he wanted to die to go be with his recently deceased wife. Kurtz claimed that he was armed with a knife and that he would be willing to hurt officers if it came down to it. The officers arrived in the area and found Kurtz. He was facing and leaning up against a wall on the southwest corner of Pacific and State Street here in Spokane. Kurtz was holding a large knife to his chest like he had stated. Officers kept their distance from Kurtz and used their vehicles as a barrier between them and Kurtz. Officers LaQuire attempted to speak with Kurtz in an attempt to de-escalate the scene. Kurtz began yelling for officers to kill him immediately and started to advance towards the officers with the knife in his hand raised to his chest. Officers gave Kurtz repeated commands which he ignored at the time. Officer LaQuire deployed his taser on Kurtz and it had no effect. Kurtz continued to advance and made his way past the police vehicle they were using as a barrier. Officer LaQuire was retreating when officers Lynch and Atkins deployed their firearms. Kurtz was shot and immediately went to the ground. Medical aid was immediately rendered and medics then responded. Kurtz was declared deceased at the scene. As officers were attempting to preserve life and secure the scene, they were confronted by several individuals in the area. One of the individuals was ordering officers to shoot him as well. Again, officers used techniques in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. Several more officers responded, the crowd was eventually controlled, and the scene was secured for investigators. I will now turn it back over to Captain Meidel.
Thank you. The CAD report of information, we have a very short timeline in this incident. The call initially came in at 19:08 and 11 seconds. That is when the call was entered into our CAD system. At 1900 hours, 16 minutes and 2 seconds, Officer LaQuire advised that he was out with Kurtz. And at 1917 minutes, 25 seconds, shots were fired. So as you can see, the time between the officers arriving on scene and the time the shots were fired was approximately 1 minute, 23 seconds. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Officer LaQuire's report. It reads, Michael began yelling that he wanted to die and he wanted officers on scene to kill him. He began very slowly walking towards my patrol car. During this time, he was being given commands to stop. I wanted to stop the threat Michael presented to the officers on scene, and I wanted to be able to take him into custody safely. So, for the following reasons, I deployed my taser. armed with a large knife that was approximately 8 inches long. He stated he would hurt officers and he would not put his knife down. It was unknown what other weapons he possessed due to him not being searched. Michael was larger than me, standing approximately 6 feet and weighing 210 pounds. I am 5'8" and 175 pounds. He was within 21 feet from me, which through my training and experience is shown to be the distance a suspect can reach an officer before a firearm can be drawn from the holster. Due to my firearm being in the holster, I needed to stop the threat before he could reach me. Michael already made it clear his state of mind was he wanted to die, and he was willing to do what he had to for that to happen. He was screaming something to the effect of, "Kill me." He was continuing to approach my position of cover, even after being told to stop multiple times. Michael continued to walk forward towards officers after being given commands to stop. He continued to hold the knife to his chest as he approached officers, even after being told to drop the knife. After deploying my taser, I immediately recognized that the dart stuck in Michael's jean jacket. The application of the taser was ineffective. I removed the spent cartridge and put in a new one. At that time, Michael continued to walk forward. I had to start backing up to try and stay away from him. When he cleared the corner of my trunk, I was in fear that I would be stabbed. I no longer had the ability to use my vehicle as a position of cover since Michael walked around my vehicle. I also was at a distance that I no longer felt safe because Michael had already previously stated he would hurt a police officer if he had to. At that moment, I said something to the effect of, "Take it," to my cover officers. I felt that if the threat of Michael being armed with a knife was not stopped, I would have been seriously injured or killed with the knife. Even though his pace of walking did not change, he already closed the distance on the officers on scene, making us vulnerable to an attack at any time. I would like Lieutenant Wool to cover the prosecutor's review now.
Like Captain Meidel said, this did go to the prosecutors. This case was investigated by the Spokane Investigative Regional Response Team, which is made up of the Spokane Police Department, Washington State Patrol, and the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, along with some outlying agencies that also assist. This went to Prosecutor Larry Haskell's office, who then released this statement. June 21st, 2016. The Spokane County Prosecutor's Office has determined that Spokane police officers Ryan Atkins and Brandon Lynch were justified in their use of deadly force during an encounter with Michael S. Kurtz near the intersection of Pacific and State Street in Spokane, Washington. Under these circumstances, the evidence shows that Kurtz confronted officers while holding a large knife and threatened to harm himself and the officers. He ignored repeated commands to drop the knife, back up, and let officers help him. An attempt to stop Kurtz with a taser failed, and he continued to move within the safe distance for officer safety. Under these circumstances, it was reasonable for the officers to respond with deadly force. Further, it is clear that the officers acted without malice or evil intent. Therefore, criminal charges will not be pursued.
So before we move into the body camera footage portion, I would like to provide some context as to what you will see. The incident came in as a suicidal subject. This is a type of call where officers receive sometimes multiple during a single shift. And the majority of these calls result in a successful outcome. And officers are available and able to provide help and assistance to the majority of these individuals. I would like you to take note of the pedestrian traffic that is around the area of the shooting and the multiple people in different locations. You will also notice de-escalation techniques, and what I mean by that is there are words, actions, tone of voice and multiple de-escalation being used by the officers during this incident. They also use time, distance, and cover. And I would like you to note the distance that Mr. Kurtz covered during the initial point of the officer's contact. And there are 3 different officers, and each of the officer accessed a different weapon. We have a handgun, a rifle, and a taser. This gives an opportunity for officers to have multi-force options. And you may or may not know that our bullet-resistant vests do not stop edged weapons or knives. And so with that, we will move on to the body camera footage. And just as a reminder, you won't hear any audio for about the first 30 seconds as the video is buffering.
My name's Chris, brother. What's going on with you? Yep. Hey, partner, my name's Chris. Why don't you talk to me?
320, you have non-lethal and lethal cover. And he has a very large knife to his chest.
Partner, my name's Chris, man. What's going on with you?
I just want to die.
Well, we just want to help you, man.
Kill me.
No, we don't want to do that.
That's how you help me.
No, what? Just talk to me, buddy. Don't do it.
Kill me.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Kill me.
Don't do it, sir. Just put your knife down, partner. Put it down.
Hey. Stop now. You stop. Kill
In
me.
there. In there. Nothing. Nothing.
Kill me. Back up now. Drop the knife. We want to help you. Kill me. We want to help you.
Don't make us do this, partner. Don't make us do this.
Kill me.
Take it.
Shots fired, shots fired.
You got a medikit? You go grab a medikit now.
We're going to need medics here ASAP.
Grab the knife from him. All right, buddy. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is no good. We need to just put kits and dressing on it.
Here, just wrap that up around him.
Back up! Back up!
Go away now!
Back the hell up! You hear me? Back up! We're trying to help. Back up!
You're trying to help? You guys just tried to
Back
cold blood!
Back up!
You shot him down in cold blood!
We're gonna need
Cold
done.
blood! You guys are disgusting! Disgusting! You are! That's cold blood! Right there! That's cold!
No, we need more units, please.
Oh yeah!
Bring me in.
That's
I got this. I got this.
Yeah, shoot
Back
me!
up!
Shoot me!
Back up!
Shoot me there!
Back up!
Shoot me like you shot him! Do it!
Please back up!
Do it! You guys, all of you! Do it! I know that! I know that!
Well, I'm not. We want you to back up.
That's shit, dude! You guys, I know that deserves to be shot down in cold blood!
Okay.
I know that back!
Please back up, sir.
Match me! Match
We're
me!
not going to do that, sir. Please,
Match me! Match me back up! Match me!
please back up, sir.
Match me!
We,
Match me! Right now!
why are you doing this?
Match
Please
me.
back up, sir.
Match me.
Can you please have him help? Please have him get. You're going to be placed in arrest. You're going to be placed under.
No!
More units coming.
I know! Get off me! get off me. Stop. Get off. You got it. You got it. You got it. Come on. Go. Yeah. Kill me! That's how you help me! Kill me! Kill me! Don't do it! Kill me! Put it down! Kill me! Stop now! Stop! Don't me! Kill me! Go back! Back up now! Drop the knife! We want to help you! We want to help you! Kill me! Don't make it do this! Kill me! Grab that kid. Got it. You can put that now. Wrap that up around it. Back up! Back up! Go away now! Go back! The hell up! You hear me? Back up! Wait, you're alive? Michael! Michael, talk to me. Cold blood! Michael, talk to me. You're shot down! Cold blood! Cold blood! You're disgusting!
So just to summarize what we just saw, there were attempts at de-escalation. There was use of cover. There was the use of a taser as an alternative to lethal force. There were attempts to retreat, and the use of lethal force was a final option. And then immediately after shots were fired, officers went into life-saving measures and rendered first aid. In this case, and what you'll see when you get your video package, are the surveillance footage area videos actually have a time lapse in between where they do not capture the lethal force that was used, only the before and after. And in this situation, our body camera footage provided the entire scenario. It doesn't happen in every case, but this is a good example of why our body cameras are such a good tool. And I would like to open it up for questions now.
Describe how much more difficult it made the situation when officers, when they're attempting to help Mr. Kurtz, are then ambushed by the unruly crowd. What does that do to an already horrible scene?
It is a very difficult situation because you have 3 officers, and all officers are trained in CIT now, but with 3 officers on scene and the immediate render of first aid, it makes it difficult when there are these types of scenarios where people are coming toward them and they're having to provide a scene security job as well as life-saving measures with only 3 officers. You want to add?
Yeah, I think, as you can tell, it's very tense and rapidly evolving in that situation. And just prior to this call, there had been a bank robbery where a civilian had been shot. And so we had a lot of officers up at that situation dealing with that at the time. So stretched very thin at that point. So as Captain Meidel said, when you've got 3 officers there and you've got a crowd of people coming around, it made it real difficult for them to help the gentleman on the ground along with trying to control the crowd so that they're safe. They're trying to render the aid. As you can hear him talking to Michael, stay with me, doing that type of thing. They went into those measures, but they still had to at least have one guy watch the crowd, which unfortunately took his attention from helping the gentleman on the ground, Michael.
Do you recall how many arrests were made from that unruly crowd?
2.
2, okay. Was it the individual you can see?
That was one,
extremely aggressive?
and then there was a
Okay.
female as well.
Okay.
I didn't actually see Kurtz violate the officer's cover by going around the door. Could not he have waited a few more seconds or another officer come around from another direction to try to taser him again?
You're asking if an officer would have had time to get around on the other side? Well, as we saw in the video, the taser had proven ineffective. And so what we have here is the distance being closed in by Mr. Kurtz and the officers not having the cover of their patrol car and essentially would have been in the position of being chased by Mr. Kurtz had they attempted to go around.
So like Captain Meidel said, he did come around that back side of the car there. And had we had one of the officers break off and come around, it would have put him in a real dire situation because they would have had a crossfire. So had he then come around quickly or come at one of the officers, we would have had him in between 2 officers with guns, which puts not only them, but civilians in danger. And so that's why they are working in that situation and kind of fanned out back to cover him that way.
Were there any takeaways from the DARP or anything that you're going to change as a result of this, like training or policies or anything like that?
I don't know that they have actually facilitated the DF. You're talking about the Deadly Force Review Board?
Oh yeah, sorry, not that part.
The
But
DFRB.
Yeah, the one that's on policies.
We haven't seen the result of that yet.
Okay.
Were less lethal beanbag rounds not available at this scene, or why were those not used?
And I don't know if any of those officers on scene actually had access to those, but based on where, like Lieutenant Wool said, where all the officers were deployed to a previous call, we don't always have immediate access to the beanbag rounds.
So they're not in every car.
Correct.
Correct. At this point, those 3 did not have that. And so our hope in these situations is to set up that cover and get other people there so we have the multiple force options, like Captain Meidel talked about, whether it be in other situations a canine, less lethal beanbag rounds, those type of things. Our hope is that those resources will come so that we've got all those at our call there. And unfortunately, this situation, Mr. Kurtz kind of forced the issue before that could get there.
What kind of toll does this take on your officers? You can hear them, it's chilling, just them saying, we just want to help you. I mean, what does this do to them?
Yes, it is. It's very tolling, and no officer wants to be involved in a critical incident like this and to be involved in a shooting. What we have in place is a peer support team that responds to critical incidents such as these, to provide that measure, to provide that debriefing and a facilitation in order to keep the resilience of the officers and their state of mind And what we also do is we give officers, we're mandated to give them a minimum time off work to also relieve their stress and to maintain their mental stability for these situations.
How often do you think officers are out on a call trying to deal with this situation, and then, like we saw here, somebody else comes up and has to takes their focus away onto something else? Is that an everyday occurrence?
Multiple times a day at times. Sometimes it doesn't happen during a shift, but it does happen multiple times, and that's what officers are trained to do. They're trained to deal with situations, and they may have to go to a certain call that's more low-key and then go respond to a call where someone's in crisis. And many times it is somebody in crisis, and that just really brings the level sometimes of those watching higher, and they have to be de-escalated, even as witnesses, victims at times.
You know, like that's a good question. I mean, this is a very traumatic event, not only for the officers involved, but for witnesses. And so emotions get going. And so, yeah, it took away their attention having to deal with that. That happens on a daily basis. And like Captain Meidel alluded to earlier, we get a lot of wins in that we respond on suicidal calls like this on a regular basis, many times a day. And most of the time we can get them help that they need, which is what we want. And so for this to end up this way, it was sad for those involved, sad for the officers, and for the witnesses who saw that. I mean, you saw the emotion there. You saw the officers pleading by asking, "Sir, please step back." It's an emotional toll for everybody involved. And so, yeah, it does take away from their ability to help the injured party at that time.
Just to clarify, did both two officers with firearms fired, or just the one with the rifle?
Both officers with firearms fired.
Simultaneously.
For a total of real munitions, is that 3 rounds, 2 from the AR and 1 from the handgun?
Correct.
That is correct.
Three.
For LaQuire to stand there with a taser, with this fella charging him with a knife, and stick with the taser, knowing that he's got the AR as a backup, I mean, how much of it seems like he's gambling with his life to de-escalate this and use non-lethal force, but it almost like he's extending the possibility that he could be hurt just to try to accomplish that.
Correct. And he has faith in his fellow officers to be able to take care of the situation and resolve it and hope that he is uninjured. But because that is the tool that he chose, he doesn't have the time to be able to discard it and access his firearm.
Lieutenant, how much of a commitment is that to trying to not use deadly force in the situation, to bring a taser to a knife fight?
It's a situation that, I mean, we train for on a regular basis through in-service training, through specialty team training. You always want to lead when you can with less lethal to hopefully get the best outcome you can get. In this situation, they communicated very well. They got set up. Officer LaQuire knew what the other gentleman had, the other officers had, and so they were able to utilize that training to put the less lethal up front, knowing that if that didn't work, that they had that lethal cover, which is what we always train. And so he did. He was up there and tried the verbal de-escalation first, and so that was the very first thing we tried, followed when that didn't work to the less lethal, followed by when it became life-threatening, the lethal, unfortunately. So, yeah, it is tough. Any other questions for us?
Okay. Thank you again for coming. And Teresa will have those packets for you.
Thank you.